What would you do if the child you raised with all your love suddenly looked you in the eye and told you to get out of your own home? What would you do if everything you sacrificed for meant nothing to them? This is my story, and I need to tell you what happened because maybe, just maybe, it will help another mother out there who is going through the same pain I went through. My name is Margaret, I'm 68 years old, and 3 months ago my own daughter threw me out of the house I built with my late husband. But before you judge her too harshly, let me tell you the whole story because there's so much more you need to know. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe, because sharing these real stories might help someone else who feels alone. I lived in Portland, Oregon in a beautiful little house on Maple Street. My husband Robert and I bought that house 40 years ago when Jennifer was just born. It wasn't much back then, just a small 2-bedroom house with a tiny garden, but we poured our hearts into making it a home. Robert painted every wall, fixed every broken step, planted roses in the front yard. I sewed the curtains, painted the kitchen cabinets yellow because it made everything feel warmer, and turned that little garden into something magical. When Robert passed away 8 years ago from a heart attack, I thought I would die too. We had been married for 35 years, and suddenly I was alone in that house that held so many memories. But Jennifer was there for me then. She had just started college and she would come home every weekend to check on me. She would hug me tight and say, "Don't worry, Mom. We'll get through this together. This house will always be our home." Those words meant everything to me. After Robert died, that house became my sanctuary. I would talk to him in the mornings while I made coffee in our kitchen. I would sit in his chair and remember the way he used to read me the newspaper. I kept his tools in the garage exactly where he left them, his clothes still hanging in our closet. That house wasn't just where I lived, it was where my heart lived. Jennifer finished college with a degree in marketing and I was so proud. I had worked double shifts at the local diner for years to help pay for her education. I sold my wedding ring, my mother's jewelry, anything I could to make sure she had everything she needed. I never complained because seeing my daughter succeed was worth every sacrifice. When she graduated, she hugged me and said, "Thank you, Mom. Everything I achieve is because of you." For 2 years after college, Jennifer lived with me in the house. Those were some of the happiest days of my life since Robert died. We would cook dinner together, watch movies, talk about her job at a small marketing company downtown. She seemed happy to be home and I was so grateful to have her company. The house felt alive again with her laughter filling the rooms. But then everything changed when she met David. David Richardson came from one of those wealthy families in Portland, the kind that live in those big houses in the West Hills with views of the mountains. His father owned a chain of restaurants and David worked in real estate, selling expensive homes to rich clients. When Jennifer started dating him, I could see she was falling in love and I was happy for her. My daughter deserved to be loved. The first time Jennifer brought David home for dinner, I wanted everything to be perfect. I spent the whole day cleaning the house, making sure every corner sparkled. I cooked Jennifer's favorite meal, pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans from my garden. I set the table with my best dishes, the ones Robert and I got as wedding gifts that I only used for special occasions. When they walked through the door, I could see David looking around the house with those cold blue eyes of his. He was handsome, I'll give him that, tall with perfectly styled blonde hair and an expensive suit. But there was something about the way he looked at everything, like he was judging, measuring, finding everything lacking. I tried to ignore that feeling and focus on being a good hostess. "David, welcome to our home," I said warmly, reaching out to shake his hand. "Jennifer has told me so much about you." He shook my hand briefly, barely making eye contact. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. You have a cozy place here." I knew what cozy meant when someone like David said it. It meant small, old, not good enough. But I smiled and led them to the dining room, determined to show him how much love lived in this house. During dinner, David talked mostly about his work, his expensive car, his trips to fancy restaurants. He mentioned casually how his parents had just bought a vacation home in Aspen, how he was looking at investment properties in the Pearl District. Everything was about money, about status, about impressing people. I watched Jennifer hanging on every word and I could see she was changing right before my eyes. "The pot roast is wonderful, Mom," Jennifer said, but I noticed she barely touched her food. She used to love my pot roast. "Thank you, honey. I used Grandma's recipe, the one you always loved." David looked at his plate like the food might poison him. "It's very traditional," he said. "Jennifer, didn't you mention your mom still cooks everything from scratch? That's so old-fashioned." The way he said old-fashioned made it sound like a disease. Jennifer looked embarrassed, and that broke my heart. She had always been proud of my cooking before, always bragged to her friends about how I made everything with love. Mom likes to do things the traditional way, Jennifer said quietly, not meeting my eyes. After that dinner, things started to change. Jennifer began coming home later and later from work, always with excuses about having drinks with David or attending some social event. When she was home, she seemed distant, distracted. She started criticizing little things about the house that had never bothered her before. "Mom, don't you think this wallpaper in the living room is a bit outdated?" she would say. Or, "Maybe we should get rid of some of Dad's old furniture. It makes the place look so cluttered." Each comment felt like a small knife to my heart. That outdated wallpaper was something Robert and I had chosen together for our 25th anniversary. That cluttered furniture held memories of our life together. But I tried to be understanding. Jennifer was young, she was in love, maybe she just wanted to help modernize things. The changes in Jennifer became more obvious as weeks went by. She started dressing differently, wearing expensive clothes that I knew she couldn't afford on her marketing salary. She got her hair done at fancy salons, started carrying designer purses. When I asked her about it, she would say David liked to spoil her, or that she was investing in her appearance for her career. She also started bringing David around more often, and each time I could feel his judgment of our home, our life, our simple ways. He would make comments about how quaint everything was, how authentic our neighborhood felt. I began to understand that to David and his world, we represented everything. They looked down on working-class people with working-class values living in a working-class neighborhood. One evening in October, Jennifer came home and found me in the kitchen, canning vegetables from my garden like I did every fall. It was something I had learned from my mother, something I had taught Jennifer when she was little. She used to love helping me, standing on a chair to reach the counter, carefully placing the vegetables in jars. "Mom, what are you doing?" she asked, and there was something in her voice I had never heard before. "Shame. I'm canning the last of the tomatoes and green beans, honey. Remember how you used to help me? We'll have wonderful vegetables all winter." She looked around the kitchen at the jars, the steam, the mess that comes with preserving food. "David is coming over in an hour," she said. Can you clean this up? It makes the whole house smell." I stared at my daughter, holding a jar of tomatoes I had grown with my own hands in the garden her father had built. "Smell? Honey, this is how fresh vegetables smell. This is how we always did it." "Well, maybe it's time to change how we do things," she said, and she walked out of the kitchen. That night at dinner, David made jokes about pioneer women and living off the grid. Jennifer laughed along with him, and I felt something break inside my chest. This was the same girl who used to tell her school friends that her mom made the best canned peaches in the whole world. The final blow came 2 weeks later. Jennifer had been acting strange all day, pacing around the house, checking her phone constantly. When David arrived that evening, they both seemed nervous, excited about something. They sat me down in the living room, and Jennifer took my hands in hers. "Mom, we need to talk to you about something important." My heart jumped. Were they getting engaged? Was I going to be a grandmother? Despite everything, I felt a flutter of excitement. "David and I have been talking about our future," Jennifer continued, "and we think it's time for some changes." David leaned forward, putting on what I now recognize was his business smile. "Mrs. Patterson, Jennifer and I are getting serious about our relationship. We're thinking about moving in together, building a life together." "That's wonderful," I said, confused about why they looked so serious. "I'm happy for you both." Jennifer squeezed my hands tighter. "The thing is, Mom, David has a beautiful condo downtown, but it's not really suitable for entertaining the kind of people we need to entertain for our careers. His clients, my new colleagues from the marketing firm I'm hoping to join." I still didn't understand where this was going. "Okay." David took over, his voice smooth and practiced like he was making a sales pitch. "We were thinking that this house might be perfect for us. It has character, history. Jennifer has such wonderful memories here. And it's paid off, which would really help us financially as we start our lives together." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked between them, hoping I had misunderstood. "You want to buy the house from me?" "Not buy exactly," Jennifer said quickly. "More like, take over. I mean, it should stay in the family, right? And Mom, you're getting older. This house is getting harder for you to maintain. All those stairs, that big garden. Wouldn't you be more comfortable somewhere smaller, more manageable?" I couldn't breathe. Jennifer, this is my home. This is where your father and I built our life together. This is where I raised you. David's mask slipped for just a moment and I saw the coldness underneath. Mrs. Patterson, with respect, you're living in the past. Jennifer has a future to think about. This house could launch her career, give us the foundation we need to build something significant. But where would I go? I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. Jennifer avoided my eyes. There are some lovely senior apartments across town. Much more suitable for someone your age. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or yard work or any of that. Senior apartments. The words echoed in my head. Places where old people go to wait to die, surrounded by strangers, in tiny rooms that smell like disinfectant and loneliness. Jennifer, please. This house is all I have left of your father. All our memories are here. For a moment I saw a flicker of the daughter I raised, a shadow of doubt crossing her face. But then David reached over and took her hand and her expression hardened again. Mom, you have to understand. This isn't just about us. This is about my future, my career. David's connections could change everything for me. But I can't. I can't bring important clients to a house that still has Dad's old tools in the garage and vegetables canned in mason jars in the pantry. Each word was a slap. My husband's tools, my garden, my traditions, everything that made this house a home was now an embarrassment to my daughter. I raised you in this house, I whispered. I sacrificed everything to give you the best life I could. I worked double shifts to pay for your college. I sold my jewelry, my wedding ring. And I'm grateful, Jennifer said impatiently. But that's all in the past. We have to think about the future now. David stood up, clearly tired of what he saw as pointless emotional drama. Mrs. Patterson, let's be practical here. Jennifer is your only heir anyway. Eventually this house would be hers. We're just asking to accelerate that timeline so it can benefit her career now when she needs it most. The cruelty of those words took my breath away. He was talking about my death like it was a business transaction to be moved up for convenience. I looked at my daughter, desperate for her to defend me, to tell David he was wrong, to remember who I was and what I had given her. Instead she stood up too. Mom, we're not asking you to decide right now. But we need you to think about it seriously. David has already talked to some people about senior living options. There are some really nice places with activities and people your own age to talk to. That night, I lay in my bed, the same bed I had shared with Robert for 35 years, and I cried harder than I had since his funeral. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, all the love I had poured into raising Jennifer, all the dreams I had about growing old in this house surrounded by grandchildren and family gatherings. The next morning Jennifer was different. Distant. She moved around the house like she was already making plans, measuring spaces, imagining changes. When I tried to talk to her about our conversation from the night before, she cut me off. I don't want to discuss it anymore, Mom. David and I have made our decision. We need this house and frankly, it's wasted on one old woman living in the past. One old woman living in the past. That's what I had become to my daughter. Not Mom. Not the woman who had raised her with every ounce of love in my heart. Just an obstacle to her bright future with David. Over the next few days the pressure intensified. Jennifer would leave brochures for senior living facilities on my kitchen table. David started showing up unannounced, walking through the house like he already owned it, talking about renovations and changes. They discussed me like I wasn't there, like I was already gone. We'll definitely need to update the kitchen, David would say. Maybe knock out this wall to open up the space. And we could turn Mom's sewing room into a home office, Jennifer would add. Much better use of the space. My sewing room. Where I had made all of Jennifer's clothes when she was little, where I had sewn her prom dress, where I still quilted and mended and created things with my hands because Robert always said I could make something beautiful out of nothing. The final confrontation came on a rainy Thursday morning in November. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Jennifer came downstairs dressed in one of her expensive new outfits. She sat down at the table without pouring herself coffee, without saying good morning, and looked at me with eyes that seemed like a stranger's. Mom, David and I have been patient, but we need an answer. We found you a lovely place at Sunset Manor. It's clean, safe, they provide meals and there are lots of activities. You can move in next week. I set down my coffee cup with shaking hands. Jennifer, please. I'm begging you. Don't do this to me. This house is my whole life. She sighed like I was being unreasonable. Mom, you're being selfish. This is bigger than your sentimental attachment to an old house. This is about my future, my happiness. Don't you want me to be happy? The manipulation in those words made me angry for the first time in this whole nightmare. Don't I want you to be happy? Jennifer, I have spent my entire life trying to make you happy. I gave up everything for your happiness. And now you're asking me to give up my home, my memories, my dignity, for what? So you can impress some rich boy and his snob of friends. Her face turned cold. David isn't some rich boy. He's successful, ambitious, and he loves me. More than that, he can give me opportunities you never could. He can introduce me to people who matter, help me build a real career, a real life. A real life? What do you think we had here? What do you think your father and I built? What do you think I gave you? You gave me a small-town life in an old house with outdated ideas about how the world works, she said, and her voice was so matter-of-fact, so cruel. David is showing me what's possible when you think bigger than mason jars and vegetable gardens. I stared at my daughter and realized I didn't know her anymore. Or maybe I was finally seeing who she really was underneath all the years of love I had blinded myself with. If you don't leave willingly, Jennifer continued, David says there are legal ways to handle this. Something about elderly care and mental competency evaluations. It would be much easier for everyone if you just cooperated. The threat hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. My own daughter was threatening to have me declared mentally incompetent if I didn't hand over my home. That afternoon, while Jennifer was at work, I walked through every room of my house, touching the walls, remembering. I remembered bringing Jennifer home from the hospital as a tiny baby, walking these floors with her at night when she couldn't sleep. I remembered her first steps in this living room, her birthday parties in this dining room, the way she used to help me cook in this kitchen. I remembered how Robert and I had painted her bedroom pink when she was 7 because she was going through a princess phase. How we had converted the basement into a playroom where she could make as much noise as she wanted. How we had added a deck to the back of the house so we could have family barbecues and watch Jennifer play in the garden. Every corner held memories. Every room held love. And my daughter wanted to erase it all for the chance to impress people who would never love her the way I did. When Jennifer came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 suitcases beside me. Her face lit up with relief and what looked like happiness. Mom, I'm so glad you've decided to be reasonable about this. I'm not being reasonable, I said quietly. I'm being destroyed. But I won't fight you anymore, Jennifer. If you want this house more than you want me in your life, you can have it. She looked uncomfortable for a moment. Mom, it's not that I don't want you in my life. This is just better for everyone. No, I said, standing up. This is better for you and David. I'm just the collateral damage. I picked up my suitcases and walked toward the front door. At the threshold, I turned back one last time. Jennifer, someday you're going to realize what you've done here. Someday you're going to need someone who loves you unconditionally, someone who would sacrifice everything for you, someone who sees you as more important than money or status or impressing the right people. And when that day comes, remember that you had that person and you threw her away for a house and a man who will never love you the way I do. I walked out of my home and heard the door close behind me. As I stood on the porch where Robert and I used to sit in the evenings, watching Jennifer play in the yard, I realized that I wasn't just losing my house. I was losing my daughter. The girl I had raised, the child I had sacrificed everything for, was gone. In her place was a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to her ambitions. I moved into a tiny 1-bedroom apartment across town that cost more per month than I had ever paid for anything in my life. It smelled like other people's lives and had thin walls where I could hear my neighbors arguing and crying and living their desperate lives. From my single window I could see a parking lot and a dumpster. There was no garden, no memories, no warmth. That first night in my new apartment, lying on a strange bed in a strange room, I cried for the life I had lost, for the daughter I had lost, and for the woman I had been who was foolish enough to believe that love would be enough to keep her family together. But I had no idea yet what other betrayals were waiting for me, what other secrets Jennifer was hiding, or how much deeper this pain would go. If you're a parent watching this, hold your children a little tighter tonight, but remember that love alone isn't always enough to protect you from the people you love most. Please hit that subscribe button if this story is touching your heart, because there's so much more I need to tell you about what happened next, and maybe my pain can help someone else who's going through the same heartbreak. Living in that tiny apartment felt like being buried alive. Every morning I would wake up confused, reaching for Robert's side of the bed, listening for the familiar sounds of my own house. Instead, I heard strangers arguing through paper-thin walls, car doors slamming in the parking lot, and the constant hum of traffic from the busy street outside. This wasn't living, this was just existing, and I had to figure out how to survive in this new reality my daughter had forced upon me. The apartment cost $800 a month, which was more than I had ever paid for housing in my entire life. When Robert and I bought our house 40 years ago, our mortgage payment was only $250 a month and we thought that was expensive. Now I was paying more than triple that for a space smaller than our living room with no garden, no memories, no soul. I had some money saved from Robert's life insurance in my years of working at the diner, but I could see it disappearing faster than I had ever imagined possible. I tried to make the best of it. I hung some family photos on the walls, put Robert's favorite chair by the window, arranged my few belongings to make the space feel more like home. But you can't create a lifetime of memories overnight, and you can't make a place feel like home when your heart is still living in the house your daughter stole from you. The worst part was the silence from Jennifer. After I moved out, she didn't call, didn't check to see how I was settling in, didn't seem to care if I was okay. I would sit by my phone every evening, hoping to hear her voice, hoping she would say she had made a mistake, that she missed me, that she wanted me to come home. The phone never rang. After 3 weeks of this silence, my loneliness became unbearable. I swallowed my pride and called her. When she answered, her voice was cheerful, distracted. "Oh, hi, Mom. How are you settling in?" As if I had moved by choice, as if this was some happy adventure instead of the destruction of my life. "I'm managing," I said, because what else could I say? "How are you, honey? How are things at the house?" "Great. David and I are having so much fun fixing things up. We knocked out that wall between the kitchen and dining room like we talked about. It opens up the whole space beautifully." They had knocked out a wall in my house. They had destroyed the dining room where Robert and I had eaten thousands of meals together, where we had celebrated Jennifer's birthdays, where I had served my last dinner to my ungrateful daughter and her cold boyfriend. "We're having a housewarming party next weekend," Jennifer continued. "David's parents are coming and some of his business associates. It's going to be so elegant. A housewarming party. In my house. To celebrate taking it away from me." "That sounds lovely," I managed to say, though the words felt like glass in my throat. "I have to run, Mom. David and I are meeting the interior designer in an hour. Talk to you later." She hung up before I could say goodbye, before I could tell her I missed her, before I could ask if she missed me at all. That's when I realized that my savings wouldn't last long at this rate and I needed to find work. At 68 years old, with no skills except cooking, cleaning, and loving a family that no longer wanted me, I had to figure out how to make money to survive in this expensive new world. I started looking for jobs, but quickly discovered that nobody wants to hire a 68-year-old woman with no recent work experience. The diner where I had worked years ago had closed down. The few restaurants that were hiring wanted young, energetic people who could work nights and weekends. I applied at grocery stores, department stores, anywhere I thought they might need someone reliable and honest. Most places wouldn't even let me fill out an application once they saw how old I was. Finally, I found work cleaning houses for a service called Pristine Homes. It wasn't steady work, maybe 2 or 3 houses a week, but it was something. The pay was minimum wage, and after taxes and the cost of bus fare to get to the houses, I barely made enough to cover my rent and groceries. But it was honest work and I was grateful to have it. The houses I cleaned were mostly owned by wealthy families in the West Hills, the same neighborhood where David's family lived. These were the kind of people my daughter wanted to impress, the kind of people who had more money than they knew what to do with. I would arrive early in the morning and spend hours scrubbing their bathrooms, vacuuming their expensive carpets, dusting their collections of art and antiques that cost more than I had ever made in a year. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was cleaning toilets for the kind of people Jennifer thought were better than us, the kind of people she had thrown away her mother to impress. These people barely acknowledged my existence when I was in their homes. I was invisible, just another service person there to make their lives more comfortable. But I needed the work, so I smiled and did my best. I scrubbed their floors until they gleamed, I organized their closets full of expensive clothes, I cleaned their kitchens that were bigger than my entire apartment. And every day I thought about my own house, my own kitchen, my own garden that David and Jennifer were probably destroying to make room for their new vision of sophistication. The physical work was hard on my aging body. My knees ached from scrubbing floors, My back hurt from bending over bathtubs. My hands became red and raw from cleaning chemicals. At the end of each day I would come home to my tiny apartment exhausted, every muscle in my body screaming. But I couldn't rest because I still had my own small space to maintain, my own meals to cook, my own loneliness to endure. One evening in December, about 6 weeks after I had moved out, Jennifer called me. My heart leaped when I heard her voice, hoping she was calling to tell me she had made a terrible mistake, that she wanted me to come home. "Hi Mom, how are you doing?" "I'm doing okay, sweetheart. How are you?" "I'm great. Listen, I was wondering if you could do me a favor. David and I are going to Aspen for Christmas with his parents, and we need someone to house sit. You know, just to make sure everything's secure, bring in the mail, that sort of thing." She wanted me to house sit my own home while she went on vacation with David's family. She wanted me to sleep in my own bed as a guest, to walk through my own rooms as a stranger, to take care of the house I had been forced to abandon. "Jennifer, that's my house," I said quietly. "It feels strange to ask me to house sit my own home." "Mom, please don't start that again. This is our house now and we just need someone responsible to keep an eye on it while we're gone. I thought you'd be happy to spend some time there." Happy? She thought I'd be happy to get a temporary reprieve from my exile, a chance to pretend for a few days that I still belonged in the home I had built with my husband. "Of course I'll do it," I said, because I couldn't resist the chance to sleep in my own bed again, to cook in my own kitchen, to sit in Robert's chair and remember what it felt like to be home. That week before Christmas, while Jennifer and David were skiing in Aspen with his wealthy family, I moved back into my house as a temporary caretaker. It was both wonderful and heartbreaking. Everything was different. They had knocked out walls, rearranged furniture, painted over the cheerful yellow kitchen I had loved. They had thrown away Robert's tools, donated my canning jars to charity, replaced my homemade curtains with expensive blinds. But it was still my house. The floors still creaked in the same places, the morning light still came through the bedroom windows the same way, the roses in the front yard were still blooming despite the December cold. I spent that week talking to Robert, telling him what our daughter had done, asking him what I should do next. On Christmas Eve, sitting alone in what used to be our living room, I realized that Jennifer hadn't even wished me a Merry Christmas. She was off celebrating with David's family and I wasn't even an afterthought. I made myself a simple dinner and tried not to think about all the Christmases when this house was filled with laughter, with love, with the joy of being a family. When Jennifer and David returned from their vacation, I moved back to my apartment. Jennifer thanked me briefly for watching the house, mentioned that they had had a wonderful time, and that was it. No invitation to see photos, no stories about their trip, no acknowledgement that I had spent Christmas alone while they celebrated with David's family. But then, something happened that should have been a warning about what kind of person my daughter was becoming. About a week after they returned, Jennifer called me in tears. "Mom, I need help. Something terrible has happened." My heart jumped with worry and love, the way any mother's heart would. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Are you hurt?" "No, it's not that. It's money. The marketing firm I was hoping to join, they offered me the job, but I need to buy a whole new wardrobe for work. Professional clothes, good shoes, the right handbags. It's going to cost almost $3,000 and I don't have it." $3,000 for clothes. More money than I made in 3 months of scrubbing strangers' toilets. "What about David? Can't he help you?" "He's already done so much, Mom. He's paying for the renovations on the house, and his parents are expecting us to contribute to some charity events they're involved in. I can't ask him for more money. But this job could change everything for me. It's with a prestigious firm, the kind of clients I've always dreamed of working with." I sat in my tiny apartment, looking at my own few clothes hanging in the small closet, my worn-out shoes by the door, my hands that were still raw from cleaning chemicals. I thought about how I had sold my wedding ring to pay for her college, how I had worked double shifts to give her everything she needed. "How much do you need?" I asked, though I already knew I would give her whatever she asked for. "I hate to ask, but could you loan me $2,000? I know it's a lot, but I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I get established in the new job." $2,000 was most of what I had left in my savings account. It was my security, my safety net, the only thing standing between me and complete poverty. But she was my daughter and she was crying and she needed help. "Of course, honey. I can transfer it to your account tomorrow." "Oh, Mom, thank you so much. You're saving my life. I promise I'll pay you back, I swear." I gave her the money the next day. I transferred almost everything I had left to my daughter's account so she could buy clothes to impress the kind of people who would never care about her the way I did. Jennifer got the job, and for a few weeks she was happier than I had heard her in months. She would call me occasionally to tell me about her new office, her sophisticated colleagues, the important clients she was working with. She seemed to have forgotten about paying me back, but I didn't remind her. I was just happy to hear her voice, happy to know she was doing well. But the money situation became critical for me. Without my savings, I had to take on more cleaning jobs just to pay my rent. I was working 6 days a week now, cleaning 4 or 5 houses a day, coming home so exhausted I could barely cook myself a simple dinner. My body was breaking down from the constant physical labor, but I had no choice. I had to work or I would lose even this tiny apartment that had become my prison. One day in February, while I was cleaning a particularly large house in the hills, I overheard the owners talking about their daughter. "She's become so materialistic," the woman was saying to her friend. "All she cares about is designer clothes and impressing her boyfriend's family. I don't know where we went wrong." "At least she still calls you," her friend replied. "My daughter moved in with her boyfriend and acts like we don't exist unless she needs money." I kept scrubbing their bathroom floor, but their words hit me like arrows. Other parents were going through the same pain I was. Other mothers were being used and discarded by children they had raised with love. That same week, Jennifer called again. This time she needed money for furniture. "Mom, we're redecorating the living room and we found this amazing sofa at a boutique downtown. It's exactly what the space needs, but it's $1,800. $1,800 for a sofa. To sit in my house, in my living room, where my old furniture had been perfectly comfortable for decades." "I don't have that kind of money, Jennifer," I said honestly. "I gave you most of my savings for your work clothes." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was cold. "I thought you wanted me to succeed, Mom. This isn't just about furniture, it's about creating the right environment for my career. David's colleagues will be coming over and we need everything to look perfect." The manipulation was clear, but it still worked. She was making me feel guilty for not being able to afford to fund her expensive lifestyle. "Maybe I could sell some things," I said, looking around my tiny apartment at the few possessions I had left. "What do you have that's worth anything?" she asked, and the dismissive tone in her voice cut deep. I had my mother's china set, the one thing of value I had managed to keep when I moved out. It had been passed down through 3 generations of women in my family, and I had always planned to give it to Jennifer someday. It was worth about $2,000 according to an appraisal I had gotten years ago. "I have Grandma's china," I said quietly. "Oh Mom, that old stuff? Who uses formal china anymore? But if you could sell it, that would really help us out." "Old stuff." My family's treasured heirloom was just old stuff to my daughter. But I sold it anyway. I took my mother's beautiful china set, the dishes that had graced our family's special occasions for generations, and I sold them to a stranger so my daughter could buy a fancy sofa for the house she had stolen from me. When I gave Jennifer the money, she was thrilled. She hugged me tight and said, "You're the best mom in the world. I don't know what I'd do without you." For a moment, I felt like her mother again instead of just a source of funding for her new lifestyle. But that feeling didn't last long. Once she had the money, the calls became rare again, the visits non-existent. Spring came and I was working more hours than ever just to survive. My body was failing, my hands were permanently stained from cleaning chemicals, and I was living on cheap food just to make my money stretch. I had given my daughter everything and I was slowly dying from the effort. But the hardest part wasn't the physical exhaustion or the financial stress. The hardest part was the loneliness. I had no family left. Jennifer had made it clear that I was only useful when she needed money. I had no friends because I was too embarrassed to tell anyone what my daughter had done to me. I was too proud to admit that the child I had raised had thrown me away like garbage. One evening in April, after an especially hard day of cleaning, I came home to find a message on my answering machine. It was Jennifer and she sounded upset. "Mom, call me when you get this. Something's happened and I need to talk to you." My heart raced with worry. I called her immediately, terrified that something was wrong. "Jennifer, what's happened? Are you okay?" "It's David," she said, and she was crying. "We had a fight, a bad one. He said some awful things about me, about us, about our background. I think he might break up with me." Finally, I thought. Finally, she was seeing David for who he really was. Finally, maybe she would remember that family was more important than impressing rich people. What did he say, honey? He said I was trying too hard to be something I'm not. He said I came from nothing and I would always be nothing no matter how much money I spent trying to change myself. He said his parents think I'm a gold digger who's just using him to climb the social ladder. Each word she repeated was like a knife to my heart, not because David had said them, but because they were probably true, and because Jennifer was finally hearing what I had tried to protect her from. Oh, sweetheart, I said, I'm so sorry he hurt you. But maybe this is a blessing in disguise. Maybe this is a chance for you to remember what really matters. What do you mean? She asked. I mean, maybe it's time to come home. Not to the house, I know that's yours now, but come home to family. Come back to the people who love you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. There was a long silence, and for a moment I dared to hope that my daughter was finally ready to choose love over ambition, family over social climbing. Mom, she said finally, I need $3,000. My heart sank. What? I need to fix this with David. I need to prove to him that I'm worth it, that I can be the kind of woman he needs. I want to throw a dinner party, invite his parents, show them that I can be sophisticated and elegant. But I need money for catering, for wine, for flowers, for everything to be perfect. She hadn't learned anything. Even after being humiliated and rejected, she still thought the answer was to spend more money, to try harder to be someone she wasn't. Jennifer, I don't have $3,000. I don't have any money. I gave you everything I had. What about the house fund? She asked. What house fund? The money you and Dad were saving to fix up the house. I know there must be some account somewhere. I realized she was talking about the small emergency fund Robert and I had kept for house repairs, money I had been planning to use to survive in my old age. That money is gone, Jennifer. I used it to pay rent and buy groceries after you took my house away from me. You're being dramatic, Mom. We didn't take anything away from you. We gave you a chance for a better life. The blindness, the selfishness, the complete inability to see what she had done to me was breathtaking. A better life? I said, and for the first time in this entire nightmare I felt angry instead of just hurt. Jennifer, I'm 68 years old and I clean strangers' toilets for minimum wage just to afford a tiny apartment that smells like other people's desperation. I sold my mother's china to buy you furniture. I gave you my life savings to buy you clothes. I have nothing left and you call this a better life. I never asked you to do those things, she said defensively. You chose to help me. I chose to help you because you're my daughter and I love you. But you chose to take everything I offered and then ask for more. Look, we can talk about this later. Right now I need to focus on saving my relationship with David. Can you get the money or not? That's when I realized that my daughter didn't see me as her mother anymore. She saw me as a bank account, a source of funding for her endless attempts to buy her way into a world that would never truly accept her. She didn't love me, she used me. She didn't need me, she exploited me. No, I said quietly. I can't get you the money because I don't have it, and even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you. Fine, she said, and her voice turned ice cold. I guess I know where your priorities are. I guess I know how much my happiness means to you. She hung up on me and I sat in my tiny apartment holding the phone, finally understanding the full scope of what had happened to my life. I had raised a stranger. I had poured my love into a vessel that had no bottom, and now I was empty while she was still asking for more. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, please understand that giving everything to your children doesn't guarantee their love or loyalty. Sometimes the more you give, the less they value what you've sacrificed. Sometimes love isn't enough to create the family you dreamed of having. But my story gets worse before it gets better, and there are secrets I still hadn't discovered about what Jennifer was really doing with all the money I had given her, all the sacrifices I had made. Keep watching because the truth about my daughter was darker than I could have ever imagined. After Jennifer hung up on me that night in April, something inside me broke in a way that I didn't think could be repaired. I had finally said no to my daughter, and instead of respecting my decision, she had punished me with silence. Days turned into weeks and I didn't hear from her at all. No calls, no visits, no acknowledgement that I even existed unless she needed something from me. The silence was deafening, but it also gave me time to think clearly for the first time in months. I started to see the pattern of our relationship since she had met David. Every conversation we had was about what she needed, what she wanted, what I could do for her. She never asked how I was feeling, never wondered if I was lonely or struggling or scared about my future. I had become nothing more than a resource to be exploited. But even knowing this, I couldn't stop loving her. She was still my baby girl, the child I had rocked to sleep every night, the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and tell me I was the best mommy in the whole world. How do you stop loving someone who grew inside your body, someone you would have died for without hesitation? The spring turned into summer and my body was giving me warning signs that I tried to ignore. I was having chest pains when I climbed the stairs to some of the houses I cleaned. I was getting dizzy when I stood up too quickly. My hands were shaking sometimes and I was more tired than I had ever been in my life. But I couldn't afford to be sick, couldn't afford to miss work, couldn't afford to see a doctor. I was cleaning a house in July when I collapsed in their bathroom. One minute I was scrubbing their marble shower and the next minute I was on the floor, gasping for breath, sharp pains shooting through my left arm. The homeowner, a kind woman named Mrs. Chin, found me there and called an ambulance. At the emergency room they told me I had had a mild heart attack. The stress, the poor diet, the physical exhaustion, and the emotional trauma had all combined to damage my heart. The doctor, a young man who looked about Jennifer's age, told me I needed to slow down, reduce stress, eat better, and follow up with a cardiologist. Do you have family who can help you during your recovery? He asked, looking at my chart. Someone who can drive you to appointments, help with groceries, that sort of thing? I almost laughed at the question, but it came out as a sob instead. I have a daughter, I said, but she's very busy with her own life. The doctor looked at me with kind eyes that reminded me of Robert's. Mrs. Patterson, you need to understand how serious this is. Your heart has been damaged. If you don't make significant changes to your lifestyle, the next heart attack could kill you. You need support and you need to prioritize your health. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days, and during those 3 days I kept hoping Jennifer would call or visit. I had listed her as my emergency contact, so I knew the hospital must have tried to reach her. But she never came, never called, never seemed to care that her mother had nearly died alone in a stranger's bathroom. On the 3rd day, a social worker named Sandra came to see me. She was a middle-aged woman with gentle eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Mrs. Patterson, we're concerned about your living situation, she said. You live alone, you have a demanding physical job, and you've just suffered a cardiac event. Do you have anyone who can help you during your recovery? I explained my situation as honestly as I could without going into all the painful details. I told her I had a daughter who was busy with her career, that I lived in a small apartment and worked cleaning houses to pay my bills. Sandra listened carefully, then pulled out a folder. I'm going to give you some resources for seniors in your situation. There are programs that can help with groceries, transportation to medical appointments, even some financial assistance for people recovering from medical emergencies. The word seniors hit me like a slap. I was a senior now, an elderly woman who needed help from strangers because her own family had abandoned her. When had that happened? When had I become one of those sad old women I used to see at the grocery store, counting coupons and struggling to carry their bags? When I was discharged from the hospital, I took a taxi back to my apartment because I had no one to pick me up. The taxi driver, a kind man from Somalia, helped me up the stairs and asked if I would be okay alone. I lied and said my daughter would be checking on me soon. I spent the next week recovering in my tiny apartment, eating crackers and soup because I was too weak to cook and too proud to ask for help. Every day I hoped Jennifer would call, would somehow sense that I needed her, would remember that she had a mother who loved her. On the 7th day after I came home from the hospital, she finally called. Hi Mom, how are you? Her voice sounded cheerful, casual, like nothing had happened. I realized the hospital must not have been able to reach her, or maybe she had ignored their calls. Jennifer, I said, and my voice was weak from not talking to anyone for days. I've been in the hospital. What happened? For a moment she sounded like the daughter I remembered, concerned and worried about her mother. I had a heart attack last week. I was in the hospital for 3 days. There was a pause and I could hear her processing this information. Oh my God, Mom. Are you okay? Why didn't you call me? They tried to reach you. You were listed as my emergency contact. Another pause. I've been so busy with work and David and I have been dealing with some things. I must have missed the calls. I'm so sorry. But she didn't sound sorry. She sounded inconvenienced, like my heart attack was an interruption to her busy schedule. Are you okay now? Are you back home? I'm home, but I'm not okay, Jennifer. The doctor says I need to make major changes to my life. I can't keep working the way I have been. I need help and I need to see a cardiologist regularly. What kind of help? I need someone to drive me to doctor appointments. I need help with groceries with heavy cleaning. I'm not supposed to do physical labor anymore. I waited for her to offer to say she would help me, to act like a daughter whose mother had almost died. Instead she said, "Mom, you know David and I are dealing with our own problems right now. Maybe you should look into those senior services. I'm sure there are programs for people in your situation." People in my situation. Old people. Discarded people. People whose families don't want to be bothered with them. Jennifer, I almost died. I collapsed alone in a stranger's bathroom and nearly died, and you want me to call strangers for help instead of my own daughter. I'm not saying I won't help, she said defensively. I'm just saying I can't drop everything to be your caregiver. I have a career, a relationship, a life. You raised me to be independent and now I am. Independent. She called using me for money and stealing my house independence. What kind of help do you need right now? She asked, and I could hear the impatience in her voice. I need to see a cardiologist next week and I can't drive yet. Could you take me to the appointment? Next week is really bad for me. We're launching a big campaign at work and David and I are supposed to have dinner with his parents. What day is the appointment? I told her and she sighed. That's right in the middle of my work presentation. Can't you reschedule? It's a follow-up to a heart attack, Jennifer. It's not a haircut appointment that can be rescheduled for convenience. Let me see what I can do. But she never called back to confirm, never followed up to see if I had figured out how to get to my appointment. I ended up taking 3 buses and walking 4 blocks to get to the cardiologist's office, arriving exhausted and late because I had gotten lost trying to navigate the bus routes. The cardiologist, Dr. Martinez, was a kind woman about my age who looked at my test results with concern. Mrs. Patterson, your heart has sustained significant damage. Your ejection fraction is quite low, which means your heart isn't pumping blood effectively. You need medication, you need to drastically reduce stress, and you need to stop all physically demanding work immediately. I can't stop working, I said. I need the money to survive. She looked at me over her glasses. What kind of work do you do? I clean houses. She shook her head. That kind of physical labor could kill you. Literally. Your heart cannot handle that strain anymore. Then what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to live? Martinez leaned back in her chair. Do you have family who can help? Social Security? Any other source of income? I laughed bitterly. My daughter is too busy with her career to help, and my Social Security barely covers my rent. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to be blunt with you. You need to apply for disability benefits, look into senior housing assistance and find a support system. Because if you keep living the way you're living, working the way you're working, you'll be dead within a year. The bus ride home from that appointment was the longest journey of my life. I sat in the back of a crowded bus, surrounded by people going about their daily lives, and realized that I was going to die poor, alone, and forgotten by the child I had given everything to raise. That night I called Jennifer and told her what the doctor had said. So you can't work anymore? She asked. Not physical work. The doctor says it could kill me. Well, what are you going to do for money? Not, how can I help? Or, don't worry, we'll figure this out together. Just concern about money, as if I was a problem to be solved rather than her mother who needed care and love. I don't know, Jennifer. I really don't know. Have you looked into those programs the social worker mentioned? Maybe you could get some kind of assistance. She wanted strangers to take care of me rather than taking any responsibility herself. Jennifer, I need you to understand something. I'm sick, I'm scared, and I'm alone. I raised you by myself after your father died. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. I gave you everything I had, including my house, my savings, my mother's china, everything. And now, when I need you most, you're treating me like I'm a burden. There was a long silence, and for a moment I hoped she would finally understand, finally remember that she owed me something, finally act like the daughter I had raised. Mom, I understand you're scared. But you can't expect me to sacrifice my whole life to take care of you. I'm 28 years old. I'm supposed to be building my future, not managing your problems. My problems. My heart attack, my homelessness, my poverty were just problems that inconvenienced her. I'm not asking you to sacrifice your whole life, I said, and I was crying now. I'm asking you to care. I'm asking you to help. I'm asking you to remember that I'm your mother and I love you. Of course you love me, she said impatiently. But love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't solve practical problems. We both need to be realistic about our situations. That conversation ended like all our conversations now ended, with Jennifer making excuses and me feeling more alone than before I had called. The next few weeks were the darkest of my life. I couldn't work, so I had no income beyond my small Social Security check. I was falling behind on rent, surviving on cheap food that was terrible for my damaged heart and getting sicker every day. I applied for disability benefits, but the process was complicated and slow, and I was told it could take months to get approved. I started selling the last of my possessions. I sold my wedding dress, my high school yearbooks, my few pieces of jewelry. Each item I sold felt like I was erasing another piece of my history, another memory of the woman I used to be when I had a home and a family and a reason to wake up every morning. One evening in August, while I was trying to figure out how I was going to pay next month's rent, Jennifer called me with news that should have been wonderful but felt like a knife to my heart. "Mom, I have some exciting news." Her voice was happy, bubbling with joy that she couldn't wait to share. "What is it, sweetheart?" "David proposed. We're engaged. We're going to have a Christmas wedding at his parents' country club. Isn't that wonderful?" My daughter was getting married, and instead of feeling joy, I felt a crushing sadness because I knew what this meant. It meant she had chosen her new life completely, had chosen David's world over any connection to me or our family. "Congratulations, honey," I said, trying to sound happy. "I'm so happy for you. The wedding is going to be beautiful. David's mother is helping us plan everything. We're having it at the Portland Country Club with a full orchestra and flowers flown in from California. It's going to be like a fairy tale. A fairy tale wedding that I couldn't afford to attend, in a world where I didn't belong, celebrating the marriage of a daughter who had already forgotten I existed." "Have you set a date?" I asked. "December 23rd. Right before Christmas, so it'll be magical with all the holiday decorations." "That sounds lovely. I can't wait to be there." There was a pause, and in that pause I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Mom, about the wedding. David and I have been talking about the guest list, and we're trying to keep it small and elegant. Just immediate family and close friends." I waited for her to continue, but she didn't. "I'm immediate family, Jennifer. I'm your mother." "Of course you are. It's just, the thing is, David's family is very traditional, very formal. And the country club has certain standards." She was trying to find a polite way to tell me I wasn't good enough for her wedding, wasn't sophisticated enough to meet David's family's standards. "What are you saying, Jennifer?" "I'm saying that maybe it would be better if you didn't come to the ceremony. We could have a private celebration afterward, just the three of us. Wouldn't that be more meaningful?" My daughter was uninviting me from her wedding. My only child, the baby I had carried and delivered and raised and sacrificed everything for, didn't want me at the most important day of her life because I would embarrass her in front of her new family. "You don't want me at your wedding," I said, and it wasn't a question. "It's not that I don't want you there. It's that I want you to be comfortable, and I'm afraid you wouldn't enjoy being around all those people you don't know, all that formality." She was making it sound like she was protecting me instead of rejecting me. "Jennifer, I raised you alone after your father died. I worked 2 jobs to pay for your education. I sold everything I owned to help you start your career. And now you're telling me I'm not good enough to watch you get married." "It's not about being good enough," she said, but her voice was cold now. "It's about fitting in. David's family moves in certain circles and they have expectations. I can't have anything disrupting this wedding. It's too important. More important than your mother being there?" "Different kind of important," she said. "This is about my future, Mom. This is about the life I'm building with David. I need everything to be perfect." Perfect. And apparently, I was the imperfection that needed to be removed from her perfect day. "So when exactly were you planning to tell me about this private celebration we're supposedly going to have afterward?" "We'll figure something out," she said vaguely. "Maybe a nice dinner, just the 3 of us." But I knew there would be no dinner, no private celebration, no acknowledgement of my existence at all once she became Mrs. David Richardson and fully entered his world. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment and tried to process what had just happened. My daughter was getting married and didn't want me there. She had chosen her new family over the woman who had given birth to her, raised her, and sacrificed everything for her happiness. I thought about calling her back, demanding that she reconsider, fighting for my right to be at my own daughter's wedding. But what would be the point? She had already made her choice and I was not part of it. Instead, I called the one person I had met in this whole nightmare who had shown me any kindness. Mrs. Williams was my neighbor in the apartment complex, an 80-year-old widow whose own children lived far away and rarely visited. We had started talking over the past few months, sharing coffee sometimes and talking about the loneliness of being old and forgotten. "Margaret, what's wrong?" she asked as soon as she heard my voice. I told her everything, about the heart attack Jennifer had ignored, about being uninvited from the wedding, about the slow realization that my daughter saw me as nothing more than an embarrassment to be hidden away. Mrs. Williams listened without judgment, and when I was finished she was quiet for a long time. "Margaret," she said finally, "sometimes the children we raise grow up to be strangers. Sometimes the love we give them gets twisted into something ugly, and they use it as a weapon against us. But that doesn't mean the love was wrong. It just means they weren't worthy of it." Her words should have been comforting, but they just made me sadder. How do you accept that your child isn't worthy of your love? How do you stop hoping that someday they'll remember who you are and what you mean to each other? 3 days before Jennifer's wedding, I had another heart episode. Not a full heart attack this time, but chest pains and shortness of breath that sent me to the emergency room again. As I lay on the gurney, waiting for test results, I thought about how Jennifer was probably having her final dress fitting, probably laughing with David's mother about flowers and music and all the details of her perfect wedding that I wasn't allowed to attend. The nurse who treated me was a kind young woman who reminded me of Jennifer at that age, before she became someone I didn't recognize. "Is there anyone we can call for you?" she asked. "Family or friends who should know you're here?" I thought about Jennifer, probably busy with wedding preparations, probably annoyed if the hospital interrupted her perfect week with news about her inconvenient mother's health problems. "No," I said. "There's no one to call." And that's when I realized the full truth of my situation. I was completely alone in the world. My husband was dead, my daughter had abandoned me, and I was going to spend whatever time I had left sick and poor and forgotten by the people I had spent my life loving. If you're watching this and you're recognizing your own story in mine, please know that you're not alone. There are more of us than you might think: parents who gave everything and received nothing, mothers who raised children who grew up to be strangers, fathers who worked their whole lives to provide for families who forgot their sacrifices. But there's still more to my story, and the worst revelation was yet to come. Because what I discovered about how Jennifer had been using the money I gave her, about what she had really done with our family home, about the lies she had been telling me for months, that was going to break what was left of my heart in ways I never could have imagined. Stay with me because you need to know the whole truth about what my daughter had become. December 23rd came and went like any other day for me, except it was the day my only daughter got married without me there. I spent that day in my tiny apartment, looking at old photo albums from when Jennifer was little, trying to remember the child who used to tell me she loved me more than ice cream and candy combined. I wondered if she thought about me at all on her wedding day, or if I had become so irrelevant to her life that she forgot I even existed. 2 days after Christmas, Mrs. Williams knocked on my door with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. She had become my only friend in this whole nightmare, the only person who seemed to care whether I lived or died. "Margaret, I saw something yesterday that I think you need to know about," she said, settling into my small kitchen chair. "What is it?" She pulled out a newspaper and opened it to the society section. There, in full color, was a large photo of Jennifer's wedding. She looked beautiful in an expensive white gown, standing next to David in his tuxedo, both of them smiling at the camera like they were the happiest people in the world. "Portland Society Wedding Unites Two Prominent Families," read the headline. The article went on to describe the elaborate ceremony at the country club, the reception for 200 guests, the flowers flown in from California, the full orchestra that played for dancing. 200 guests. My daughter had invited 200 people to her wedding, but not her own mother. "That's not all, Mrs. Williams said gently. Read the part about the bride's family." I found the paragraph and read it aloud, my voice getting smaller with each word. "The bride, Jennifer Patterson Richardson, is the daughter of the late Robert Patterson and Margaret Patterson, who was unable to attend due to health concerns." Health concerns. She had told the newspaper I couldn't come because of health concerns, making it sound like I was too sick to attend rather than admitting she had uninvited me because I wasn't good enough for her new life. Margaret, Mrs. Williams said softly, I've been thinking about something. You said Jennifer needed money for this wedding, right? But look at this photo. Look at this description. This wedding cost more money than most people make in years. Where did she get that kind of money? I stared at the photo, at my daughter in her designer gown, at the elaborate decorations, at the obvious expense of everything. Mrs. Williams was right. Even with David's family money, this level of luxury was extraordinary. And I remembered all the times Jennifer had come to me for money, claiming she was struggling, claiming she needed help. I need to find out what's really going on, I said. The next morning, despite my weak heart and my doctor's warnings, I took 3 buses across town to my old neighborhood. I needed to see my house, needed to understand what Jennifer and David had really done with the home Robert and I had built. When the bus dropped me off on Maple Street, I almost didn't recognize my own neighborhood. Several of the modest houses had been torn down and replaced with modern mansions. The whole character of the street was changing as wealthy people moved in and displaced the working families who had lived there for generations. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I reached my house. It was gone. Where my house had stood, where Robert and I had raised Jennifer, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays and built a lifetime of memories, there was now a massive construction site. Workers were building what looked like a mansion easily 3 times the size of my little house. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the destruction of my life, trying to understand what had happened. A construction worker noticed me and walked over. Can I help you, ma'am? You look lost. This used to be my house, I said, and my voice sounded hollow even to me. I lived here for 40 years. He looked at me with sympathy. Oh, you must be Mrs. Patterson. Yeah, we heard about you from the neighbors. I'm sorry about what happened. It must be hard to see your home being torn down. When did this happen? When was my house demolished? About 6 weeks ago. Right after the new owners closed on the property. They wanted to start construction immediately. 6 weeks ago. Right around the time Jennifer was planning her wedding, claiming she needed money for furniture and decorations and all the expenses of her new married life. Do you know who bought the property? He looked uncomfortable. Well, I probably shouldn't say, but since it was your house. The new owners are a young couple named Richardson. Real nice people, very excited about building their dream home here. Richardson. Jennifer and David had bought my house from Jennifer, demolished it, and were building a mansion on the land where I had lived my entire adult life. But that meant, Sir, do you know how much they paid for this property? He shrugged. I heard it was around $400,000. Good price for this neighborhood, especially with all the development happening around here. $400,000. Jennifer had sold my house for $400,000, and I had never seen a penny of it. I walked around the construction site in a daze, trying to piece together what had really happened. Jennifer hadn't just taken my house to live in, she had stolen it from me and sold it for an enormous profit. All those times she had come to me begging for money, claiming she was struggling, she had been sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars that rightfully belonged to me. A neighbor I recognized, Mrs. Garcia, came out of her house and saw me standing there. Margaret. Oh honey, I'm so sorry. I tried to call you when they started tearing down your house, but I didn't have your new number. Mrs. Garcia, did you see Jennifer when all this was happening? She looked uncomfortable. Well, yes. She was here quite a bit, meeting with contractors and architects. She seemed very excited about the new house they were planning. I have to say, I was surprised that she was tearing down your beautiful home. It had so much character, so many memories. Did she say anything about me? About why I wasn't involved in these decisions? Mrs. Garcia's expression grew even more uncomfortable. Margaret, I don't want to hurt you, but I think you should know. Jennifer told everyone in the neighborhood that you had moved to a senior facility because you were having memory problems. She said you were getting confused about money and property, and that you had signed everything over to her for your own safety. Memory problems. Confusion about money. Jennifer had told our neighbors I was losing my mind to explain why I had disappeared from my own life. She also said you were much happier in your new place, that you had made lots of friends and were getting the care you needed. I stood there listening to the lies my daughter had told about me, the story she had created to cover up her theft of my home and my life. To everyone who had known us, I wasn't a victim of my daughter's greed and manipulation. I was a confused old woman who needed to be managed for her own good. That evening I called Jennifer. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number, but I needed to confront her with what I had discovered. "Hi, Mom," she answered, and her voice was cheerful, relaxed. "How are you doing?" "Jennifer, I went to the house today." There was a pause. "What house?" "My house. Our house. The house you said you needed to live in, the house you forced me to leave so you could impress David's friends and colleagues." "Oh." Her voice changed immediately, became guarded. "What about it?" "It's gone, Jennifer. You tore it down. You sold my house and demolished it, and you're building a mansion on the property." Another pause, longer this time. "Mom, I can explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how you lied to me. Explain how you stole my house and sold it for $400,000 while begging me for money. Explain how you told the neighbors I had memory problems to cover up your theft." "I didn't steal anything," she said, and now her voice was defensive, angry. "That house was going to be mine eventually anyway. I just took ownership a little earlier than planned." "A little earlier?" "Jennifer, you threw me out of my own home and told me it was for my own good. You made me live in poverty while you were sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars that belonged to me. The house was in both our names after Dad died, remember? I had every legal right to sell it. I remembered the paperwork after Robert died, how Jennifer had insisted on being added to the deed, just in case something happened to me. I had thought it was a reasonable precaution, a way to make sure she would inherit the house without legal complications. I never imagined she would use it to steal my home while I was still alive. Legal right doesn't make it morally right, Jennifer. That was my home. Those were my memories. You had no right to destroy everything your father and I built together. It was just an old house, Mom. Sentimental value doesn't pay bills or build futures. David and I are creating something better, something that will last. What about all the times you asked me for money? What about when you needed $2,000 for work clothes, or when you wanted money for furniture, or when you begged me for $3,000 for that dinner party? You had hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you took my life savings instead. That money was tied up in investments and construction costs," she said impatiently. "I couldn't access it for day-to-day expenses. So you decided to bleed me dry instead? You let me sell my mother's china, you let me work myself into a heart attack, you let me live in poverty while you were wealthy. I never asked you to sell anything. I never forced you to work those jobs. You made those choices." The cruelty of those words, the complete lack of responsibility or remorse, took my breath away. "Jennifer, do you hear yourself? Do you understand what you've done to me? I haven't done anything to you. I've built a life for myself, and I'm sorry if you can't be happy for me." "Happy for you? You stole my house, lied to our neighbors about my mental health, uninvited me from your wedding, and left me to die alone in poverty. What exactly should I be happy about?" "You're being dramatic again, Mom. Nobody left you to die. You're fine, you have an apartment, you have Social Security. Not everyone gets to live in luxury." "I'm not asking for luxury, Jennifer. I'm asking for basic human decency from my own daughter. Look, I don't have time for this guilt trip. David and I are busy with the new house and we're planning our honeymoon. If you want to wallow in self-pity instead of being proud of what I've accomplished, that's your choice." She was about to hang up, and I realized this might be the last conversation I would ever have with my daughter. I needed to say something that would make her understand the magnitude of what she had done. "Jennifer, wait. I have something to tell you." "What?" "I'm dying." There was silence on the other end of the line. "The damage to my heart is extensive. My doctor says I have maybe 6 months, maybe less. The stress, the poverty, the heartbreak of what you've done to me, it's killing me literally." "Mom, don't say that. You're going to be fine." "No, I'm not going to be fine. I'm going to die poor and alone because my daughter chose money over love, chose status over family, chose a man who will never care about her the way I do over the mother who would have died for her. That's not fair. You can't blame me for your health problems." "Can't I?" "Jennifer, you destroyed my life for profit. You stole everything I had and left me with nothing. You broke my heart so completely that my body couldn't handle the pain. If that's not blameworthy, I don't know what is." I could hear her crying now, and for a moment I hoped that maybe I had finally reached the daughter I had raised, the child who used to love me. "Mom, I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted to build something better for myself." "At what cost, Jennifer? Was it worth it? Was impressing David's family worth destroying your relationship with your mother? Was that house worth watching me suffer?" "I don't know," she whispered. I don't know anymore. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, might ask how she could make things right, might remember that she was my daughter and I had loved her unconditionally for 28 years. Instead she said, "But I can't change what's done now. We both have to live with the choices we've made." No, Jennifer. You have to live with the choices you made. I have to die with them. I hung up the phone and sat in my tiny apartment, finally understanding that my daughter was lost to me forever. She wasn't going to have a change of heart, wasn't going to realize the magnitude of her betrayal, wasn't going to choose love over greed. She had become someone I didn't recognize, someone I wouldn't want to know if she wasn't my child. Over the next few weeks, my health continued to deteriorate. The stress of discovering the truth about the house, the final confrontation with Jennifer, the crushing realization that I would die unloved and forgotten by my only child, it all took its toll on my damaged heart. Mrs. Williams checked on me every day, bringing me soup and medicine and the only kindness I had left in my life. She helped me apply for emergency assistance programs, helped me organize my few remaining possessions, helped me write a will that left everything I had to charity since I no longer had a daughter worth leaving anything to. "Margaret," she said one afternoon as we sat drinking tea in my kitchen, "I want you to know something. You did nothing wrong. You loved your daughter the way mothers are supposed to love their children. The failure here isn't yours, it's hers." "But where did I go wrong, Mrs. Williams? How did I raise a child who could be so cruel?" "Sometimes people are just born without the capacity for real love," she said sadly. "Sometimes no amount of good parenting can create empathy in someone who doesn't have it naturally. You gave her everything you had, and she chose to see that as weakness instead of strength." 1 month after my final conversation with Jennifer, I was organizing my small desk when I found an envelope that had been delivered while I was at a doctor's appointment. Mrs. Williams had signed for it and left it by my door, thinking it was medical paperwork. It was from a law office downtown. Inside was a letter that made my blood run cold. "Dear Mrs. Patterson, we represent Mr. and Mrs. David Richardson in the matter of your continued contact with Mrs. Richardson. Our clients have requested that you cease all telephone calls, visits, and other forms of communication with Mrs. Richardson. Any further contact will be considered harassment and may result in legal action, including a restraining order. Please govern yourself accordingly." A restraining order. My own daughter had hired lawyers to prevent me from contacting her. She had legally declared me a threat to her safety and happiness. Attached to the letter was a check for $5,000 and a note in Jennifer's handwriting. "This should cover your expenses for a while. Please use this money to find the help you need and stop trying to make me responsible for your problems." $5,000. After stealing $400,000 from the sale of my house, after taking my life savings, after destroying everything I had built in 40 years of marriage and motherhood, she was offering me $5,000 to disappear from her life forever. I stared at that check for a long time, thinking about what it represented. It wasn't generosity, it was a payoff. It wasn't love, it was guilt money. It was Jennifer's way of telling herself she had done her duty as a daughter while legally preventing me from ever asking her for anything again. I thought about cashing it. $5,000 would pay my rent for several months, would let me buy the heart medications I needed, would give me some security in my final months of life. But taking that money would mean accepting Jennifer's version of our relationship, would mean agreeing that I was a problem to be solved rather than a mother deserving of love and respect. I tore up the check. That night I wrote a letter to my daughter. Not to send to her. I knew her lawyers would intercept anything I tried to mail. But I needed to say the words, needed to put my final thoughts down on paper. "My dear Jennifer," I wrote, "I am writing this letter knowing you will never read it, but needing to say these words anyway. You were the greatest joy of my life and the greatest heartbreak. I loved you from the moment I felt you move inside my body, and I will love you until the moment I die. I am sorry I failed to teach you that love is more valuable than money, that family is more important than status, that kindness matters more than success. I am sorry I raised you to believe that taking everything someone offers means you deserved it all along. I am sorry I couldn't show you that true wealth comes from the people who love you unconditionally, not from the people you have to pretend to be someone else to impress. I forgive you for what you did to me, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because carrying anger would only poison what little time I have left. But I want you to know that someday when David leaves you for someone younger or richer or more useful to his ambitions, When his family decides you're not quite good enough after all, when you find yourself alone and scared and needing someone who loves you just for being you, remember that you had that person and you threw her away for a house and some money and the approval of people who will never care about you the way I did. I hope you find happiness in the life you chose, but I suspect you will find only emptiness dressed up as success. Your loving mother, Margaret. I sealed that letter in an envelope and put it in my desk drawer, next to the torn pieces of her gilt money check. 3 months later, on a quiet Tuesday morning in March, Mrs. Williams found me in my chair by the window, still in my nightgown, looking out at the parking lot that had become my final view of the world. The doctor said my heart had simply given out during the night, that I had died peacefully in my sleep. Mrs. Williams called the number she found in my address book, the only family contact I had listed. Jennifer answered on the third ring. Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Williams said. This is Eleanor Williams. I was your mother's neighbor. I'm calling to let you know that Margaret passed away last night. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Oh, Jennifer said finally. I see. Thank you for calling. She was a wonderful woman, Mrs. Williams said. She talked about you all the time, about how proud she was of you, about how much she loved you. Even after everything that happened between you, she never stopped loving you. Yes, well, what happens now? Are there arrangements to be made? Mrs. Williams had expected grief, had expected tears, had expected some sign that Jennifer cared about her mother's death. Instead, she was asking about logistics. She left instructions for cremation and she donated her body to medical research. She said she wanted to be useful even in death. There won't be a funeral. Good. I mean, that's good that she planned ahead. Very practical. She also left some belongings. Nothing valuable, just personal items, photo albums, some jewelry. Would you like me to send them to you? There was another pause. I don't really have space for old things right now. We're still settling into our new house. Maybe you could donate them to charity. Mrs. Williams hung up the phone and sat in her own kitchen, crying for the friend she had lost and the daughter who had never deserved such a mother. A week later, while cleaning out my apartment, Mrs. Williams found the letter I had written to Jennifer. She also found my small photo album filled with pictures of Jennifer as a baby, as a child, as a young woman before she met David and forgot who she was. Against her better judgment, Mrs. Williams decided Jennifer should have these things. She mailed them to the address she had found in my address book with a note. Your mother wanted you to have these. She loved you until the very end. Jennifer never responded to that package, never acknowledged receiving her mother's final letter or the photos of her childhood. But according to neighbors, about 6 months later, she and David separated. Apparently, David had been having an affair with one of his wealthy clients, someone more established in Portland society, someone whose family had old money instead of new ambitions. Jennifer tried to keep the house they had built on the ruins of my home, but without David's income she couldn't afford the payments. She was forced to sell it and move into a small apartment not unlike the one I had died in. The neighbors say she looked older, sadder, more alone. They say she would sometimes drive by our old neighborhood and sit in her car, looking at the house where someone else now lived, perhaps remembering what she had given up for a dream that turned out to be an illusion. But this story isn't really about Jennifer's eventual comeuppance or karma catching up with her. This story is about the choices we make and the prices we pay for them. It's about the difference between conditional love and unconditional love. It's about what happens when we mistake taking advantage of someone's love for deserving that love. If you're a parent watching this, love your children, but don't let them use that love as a weapon against you. Give them everything you can, but teach them that love is not a transaction, that family is not a business arrangement, that some things are more valuable than money or status or impressing the right people. And if you're a child watching this, remember that your parents won't be here forever. Remember that the people who love you unconditionally are rare and precious. Remember that success means nothing if you achieve it by destroying the people who helped you get there. I died alone and heartbroken, but I died knowing I had loved completely and given everything I had to give. Jennifer will have to live with the knowledge that she threw away the purest love she will ever receive for things that turned out to be temporary and worthless. In the end, love is all we really have to give and all we really need to receive. Everything else is just decoration. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, if it reminded you to cherish the people who love you, if it helped you remember what really matters in life, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes we all need to be reminded that love should never be taken for granted. The greatest tragedy in life isn't dying unloved. It's living without the capacity to recognize and value the love that's offered to you freely, completely, and without condition. My daughter will learn that lesson too late, but maybe someone watching this story can learn it in time to make different choices, better choices, choices that honor the love they've been given instead of exploiting it. Remember, the people who love you most are not your servants or your bank accounts or your safety nets. They are the greatest treasures you will ever possess. Treat them accordingly.